Welcome to Yas, your American Horror Stories supplemental show where we dissect each episode like we're Dr. Arden on a bad day. I'm Dallas, and you're you. It's been almost 2 years since we had any American Horror Story, and we are being treated to the first episode of American Horror Stories, a spin-off by Ryan Murphy of the flagship show that we all know and possibly love, possibly hate. It's up to you. And as far as initial thoughts go, nostalgia clashes with the concept of making something entirely new. Giving this show a reason to exist at all means introducing ideas and horrors that we haven't and won't get in the flagship series, but episodes 1 and 2 only offered retreads of scenarios that we've already seen play out, albeit with drastically different outcomes than we've become accustomed to. So without further ado, let's grab our scalpel and start digging into episode 1 titled Rubber Woman. The new series opens with a familiar scene, a family who's packed their things and expects a fresh start at the most famous stopping grounds for the show. Family arrives and gets settled in time for Scarlett to discover the iconic rubber suit, and rather than be taken aback, she immediately tries it on. This is our first real glimpse into the character of Scarlett, whose history and motivations become more clear as the episodes go on. She's troubled as far as her parents, Troy and Michael, are concerned, and she has a proclivity to rather hardcore BDSM porn that she doesn't see as a problem. A therapist is brought in to assess the situation, though she later becomes a permanent guest when a rubber person kills her in the basement after their first session. Michael also asks if Scarlett prefers to be the sadist or masochist in her relationships, but she doesn't reply. At school, we see she's a bit of an outcast. Her classmates either ignore or bully her, save for her one friend Shanti, and a rather modern form of bullying is later portrayed at a slumber party with a group of girls live-streaming Scarlett undressing and admitting her sexual fantasies to one of them who had been leading her on. When Scarlett returns home embarrassed, she lures the girls to the murder house with the threat of killing herself and then blaming them so that they'll go to jail. Her own personal darkness, however, coupled with the evil of the murder house, quickly takes over and she becomes the Rubber Woman to dole out some much-deserved revenge. Troy and Michael wake up the next morning to Scarlett working on a portion of the renovations, unaware that the bodies of the girls from school are behind the brick wall she just finished. Before the episode ends, they agree to breakfast before Scarlett answers Michael's previous question and says she prefers to be the one inflicting pain. The therapist appears and inquires about a session with Scarlett before we cut to black. Lingering questions I had after this episode included who was the rubber man who killed her, and bitch, why are you so happy to be doing your job after death? Episode 2 starts off a little jarring with an introduction to Ruby, played by Kaya Gerber, and immediately the intention of the episodes and her character becomes muddled. We had already gotten a new badass female in the previous episode, but this one begins with Ruby tormenting previous inhabitants of the house and talking about her traumatic past with a fake uncle and suicide in the murder house while in the bathtub with Scarlett. Their meeting and relationship is glossed over fairly quickly, but she beckons Scarlett to join her for eternity before we cut to titles. At this point, we've jumped forward in time a bit with the police who come to the house mentioning that the girls have been missing for a few months at this point. They also implicate Michael and Troy in assisting with whatever happened to them before they're asked to leave. Scarlett's solo therapy session is interrupted when the murdered girls re-kill the therapist, and they threaten Scarlett before being scared away by Ruby. A later family session reveals that Michael's seen at least one ghost as well, in the form of the Piggy Man. Later, Troy brings in Adam, a contractor who offers to finish up the renovations, but not before offering more than just money to pay for it, which Michael walks in on. Troy's confronted on his possible infidelity and general cruelty, but they agree to have the contractor come finish the job so that they can flip the house and get the fuck out of there. The next day, however, Adam's handyman Martin chips away at the mortar that Scarlett had worked on, and Adam hammers the wall in to discover the bodies that were hidden in there. Rather than call the cops, Adam kills Martin to hide the truth and blackmails Michael and Troy into being business partners of sorts, but he's stabbed to death by the rubber man before he could leave. Like, again, who the hell is this guy? Michael and Troy try to find Scarlett and get out, but this is where the biggest twist, in my opinion, is revealed. Ruby has actually already killed both of them to keep Scarlett there, and they are stuck in the house forever. Scarlett comes home from school that day to discover that the girls have been found, sees the new bodies added to the pile before finding her dead fathers, and they actually have a really chill therapy session regarding the logistics of dead fathers raising a live daughter. After therapy, Scarlett and Ruby are headed to a Halloween party where Shanti confronts Scarlett about where she's been for the last few months. Ruby then bitches her up and Scarlett goes to make amends, but Shanti says that she knows what Scarlett did and to leave her alone. The murdered girls, it turns out, have followed them there and they attempt to kill Shanti, but they're stopped by Ruby, who threatens them with peeling their faces off every day for the next 1,000 years. During a second attempt at her life, Scarlett bails and waits the night out before returning home. Confronted a third time, Scarlett apologizes to the girls for killing them and tells Ruby that she wants the choice to live and die as she wishes. The girls let her in the house to get her things and say goodbye to her dads before she leaves for good. Cut to 10 months later, everybody's in the house living like a fucking sitcom, getting along, making breakfast and eating together, but never mind where the food comes from. Ruby casually jokes about killing them all later while on the phone with Scarlett, and Scarlett reveals where she's been, hunting down that fake uncle of Ruby's whose house she's now outside of. She promises it's his last day on Earth and it's going to be the worst one he's ever had, before knocking on the door and hammering his head in. Now, as far as characters go, we had Scarlett, Troy, Michael, Ruby, Maya, Nicole, Rowena, Aaron, and Shanti, but Scarlett, for me, she was absolutely top-notch. She was flawed, layered, dark, and gritty, just kind of a personification of the pissed-off feelings that kids have today at a shitty world that they're inheriting that is possibly going to be going nowhere. Moving over to bits and pieces that connect to the rest of the franchise, Murder House and the Rubber Person Suit may be the biggest nods to the flagship series that we get, though I'm hoping that they opt to keep things new and fresh as possible as the series goes forward. We saw flashes of the Piggy Man, the Infantata, the Twins, and Beauregard's Ball, and the murdered nurse from Murder House returns for a brief scene as well. Marcy gets a mention as the realtor who buried Ruby's remains and hid her death from the public, and Ben Harmon also gets a mention by the therapist who's apparently writing a book with him. There were several before and after moments as well, therapy taking place in Ben's old office, troubled child in the home, the way that they found out that Michael and Troy found out they were dead, the demented mural being re-exposed, etc., etc. As far as where it places on the timeline, we did see the tags at the end of the episode on Scarlett's car. It was for September of 2022, so we can place this in modern times. And according to Ruby's ending monologue, Scarlett comes by on Halloween, every Halloween, for years, but it's not known how long she lives for or keeps this up. So y'all, I'm glad we got some new AHS in our lives, though the first episodes left me feeling satiated on one hand, happy to have gotten some horror story after so long of a wait, but also wanting them to explore the new territory and run with the possibilities that they've made for themselves by creating a show of self-contained episodes. Next week, we're looking at the episode Drive-In, and I've already got my theories about what's going on with the promo shots that we've gotten. I believe Naomi Grossman's character will have been an editor of sorts who was exposed to the forbidden film in the past and lost an eye to it, along with any shred of credibility. Now known as Rabid Ruth, she attempts to stop people from watching, but it's assumed that this does not go as planned, with later scenes of people running away in fear. We're gonna see how it all plays out, but let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments section, and y'all
have a Romeo and Michelle day. That was a good one. Thanks.